Hello, my name is Molly Bolton, and I am the Executive Director of Teaching, Learning, and Accountability. This part of the presentation will discuss the connections between the educator evaluation system and classroom learning systems. The purpose of this presentation is to really help you see the connections between the teacher standards that are used in the educator evaluation system and the components of classroom learning systems. This graphic provides you a nice overview of classroom learning systems. You will see at the top it has the four foundation pieces of classroom learning systems, which are the critical learning requirements, the class goal, learning results, and mission statement. Down below, you will see the Plan, Do, Study Act, or what we often refer to as the PDSA. This graphic is nice because it does offer you questions as well to reflect as you're going through and creating each of these pieces in your system. So we're going to begin with Standard 1 of the teaching standards that are used in the educator evaluation system. That standard is content knowledge aligned with appropriate instruction. This standard reflects that we're planning for the delivery of our content area knowledge and that we're making sure our activities are meaningful and engaging to students and that students are able to demonstrate mastery of that content that we've taught. When we make the connections to classroom learning systems, we see that through critical learning requirements and the plan and the do. By identifying our critical learning requirement, we are using the standards so that it's directly aligned. When you choose your target for your plan, you're also making sure that that target is aligned to the standards and to the critical, and will help you get to the critical learning environment. When you look at how that target helps achieve your goal, that's when you're thinking about what strategies you're going to be using and how they will be implemented. Those fall under the plan and the do phases of Plan, Do, Study Act. Standard 2 talks about student growth and development. And this is where we're really looking at those research-based practices that we're using within our lessons and that we're using student information such as current student performance, current student knowledge, student interest to really plan those meaningful lessons. We'll also incorporate strategies that we know are research and evidence-based to show student growth. And we will help students with goal setting and making sure that they are meeting those goals through their learning. When we think about the connections to classroom learning systems, we see this reflected through the learning requirements, the class goal, and the plan and the do. By identifying those learning requirements, which are tied to the standards, setting those goals for this particular lesson as well as our classroom goals, choosing our target, and then thinking about how our learning target in our plan helps us achieve the overarching goals. And then again, looking at the do, what strategies we're going to use and how that's going to engage students in their learning. Standard 3 is curriculum implementation. And this is where you're designing your lessons, again, aligned to those standards. You're going to make sure that students are mastering that learning that is dictated through the standards based on looking at your data. So this is evidenced through the learning requirements. Again, those are the standards. During the plan, choosing that learning target for that particular learning cycle, which should lead up to your critical learning requirement. And then during study, you're looking at your student data and you're thinking about how did students do with this lesson? Where are they in gaining mastery of this content? What more might we need to do, or are we ready to move on? Standard 4 is critical thinking, and this is where we're looking at the resources and the strategies we're using and making sure we're pushing kids up the taxonomies of either Bloom or DOK, whichever you might be using, to really ensure that they're able to problem solve and critically think and apply situations to real world application. So when we think about that and how it connects to classroom learning systems, we're looking at the learning requirements, the plan, and the do. So thinking about what is your learning requirement and how does that not only relate to the standards, but how does that promote that critical real world thinking? When you're choosing your learning target, we're making sure that that alignment is there for our learning requirements and thinking about how does that learning target help achieve your goal and help you increase to critical thinking and problem solving. And then your strategies, making sure those strategies are hitting those higher order thinking skills and moving to application and evaluation. Standard 5 is our positive classroom environment. These are our universals, rules, routines, and structures that are really going to create a classroom environment that helps kids learn. It also really focuses on creating students who are very self-directed, as well as building those positive relationships and making sure kids are engaged in learning. When we think about that and the relationship to classroom learning systems, we think about learning requirements, class goals, and mission statements. These pieces really make the learning visible. We're setting those goals with students, and your mission really sets the tone of your classroom to make sure that it is an engaging environment. Standard 6 is effective communication. This is where we're looking at both verbal and nonverbal communication. This can be corrective and should always assist the students in working towards their goal and giving them feedback on where they are in relation to that goal. This can be evidenced in classroom learning systems through the learning requirement, so it's very visible of what we're expecting kids to know and be able to do, our class goal, and our mission statement. Again, these explicitly state what we're doing in the classroom, what our purposes are, and what our goals are. Standard 7 is student assessment and data analysis. So this is really looking at our students progressing, looking at multiple data sources towards those critical learning requirements. We're using that student data then to inform our instruction and making sure that students are setting personal goals as well as monitoring their progress towards those personal goals. This is evidenced in the learning requirement, the class goal, and the whole cycle of Plan, Do, Study, Act. By knowing the class goal and the critical learning requirements, it's very transparent to students, so they're aware of that. The PDSA cycle is taking the data from the lessons that they have participated in, looking at their progress in that lesson towards those critical learning requirements and those goals, and then planning the next lesson based on that data. We want to ensure that students are a part of this process. This will also connect to the second part of our classroom learning systems series when we talk about teacher-student partnerships. And students will actually have data folders where they're charting their own data and setting their own goals. Standard 8 is professionalism, and this is about you. This is about your personal growth, you acquiring new knowledge and new skills to really support kids in learning. So when we think about that, just the fact that you're participating in this professional learning and that you're going to be implementing classroom learning systems is tied to that standard. The last goal is professional collaboration, and this is where we're engaging with others to promote not only the mission and vision and goals of the district and the school, but also, and most importantly, to improve student learning. Again, the whole concept of classroom learning systems centers around this engagement with the students, engagement with your classroom staff, engagement with partner district gen ed staff if appropriate, engaging with your related services folks. All of this should be included in creating this comprehensive plan. Again, when you go into teacher-student partnerships, which is the second part of this training, you will also see those collaboration pieces very strongly in those systems. So let's talk a little bit about how this connects to your teacher growth plan then. As you will see with Desi's graphic here, you are actually following a PDSA cycle when you're engaging in the educator evaluation system. You are identifying your indicator, which would be one of the indicators under those 9 standards. Then you are taking your baseline data and creating a plan. You are also looking at student growth, and all the while you're getting feedback and observations to improve your performance. Then that leads to your summative assessment, which then will be reflected on and then create your next plan. So as you can see, the state of Missouri has required us to use continuous improvement principles in teacher growth plans. When we look at the student growth plans, we are identifying those measurable and long-term goals. When you have classroom learning systems, you've already done that. That is your critical learning requirement. So those can be right in there. Then you're going to create your learning plan where you write your goal, and then you're gathering your data, analyzing your data, making sure that you have those key strategies in your lessons to address student learning so that they can meet their goals. Basically, your student growth plan will be multiple PDSA cycles. And I say multiple because you want to make sure the goal you're setting is not just a short-term goal, but a longer-term goal that really shows your teacher impact on our students' growth. So with multiple cycles, you can also look at what's working well and make adjustments to your teaching plan through the PDSA cycle to ensure that students are meeting that goal. So I've included this quote here, and I've bolded a few pieces. This quote is from Steve Jobs. So creativity is just connecting things. When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they didn't really do it. They just saw something. It seemed obvious to them after a while. And that's because they were able to connect experiences they have and synthesize new things. My hope for you today is that this presentation has done that. You can see the connections to your evaluation system and the work you're doing with continuous improvement. Remember, continuous improvement is one of the core values of Special School District, so therefore should remain in the forefront to ensure student success. As always, if you have any questions, suggestions, or comments, feel free to reach out to me at any time. I hope you have a great rest of your day and enjoy the rest of your learning.